This week, the Canadiens are going to meet Shane Wright. Is their decision already made? Or are they looking at the other guy? A bomb from the World Hockey Championships, as an assistant general manager of one team says, he spoke to people close to the situation, and he's convinced it's the other guy. A UFA who says goodbye, the Combine this week, and a Montreal Canadiens prospect who has some news for Montreal Canadiens fans. It's Brunchin with Marinaro on the Sick Podcast.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro. The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
And now a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup.
Sports entertainment like no other. Brought to you by 8.6 Beer. Intense by nature.
Marinaro, the Sick Podcast on this Sunday morning, brought to you by 8.6 Beer, Intense by Nature, the beer for those who follow their instinct and live their passions in order to make their mark. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to address something, and I know that I have been in the news over the last 48 hours or so, and I know that a lot of you want to know what's going on, and I'd love to tell you. And I will tell you at some point. I don't know when that's going to be, whether it's going to be tomorrow, in the next couple of days, in the next week or so. But I will tackle it at the right time. I do want to thank you all for all the messages of support, all the messages of concern. My listeners mean a lot to me. They always have. And they always will. It's Brunchin with Marinaro, the Sick Podcast, and we bring in from the Montreal Gazette and HockeyInsideOut.com, Stu Cowan. What's going on?
Hey, Tony. How are you, bud?
Very good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
All right, the Combine goes this week in Buffalo. And the Canadiens are going to meet with all the prospects, including Shane Wright. The interviews go, let me see if I got this right. I think it's Monday to Friday. And Saturday is fitness testing. And once again, it takes place in Buffalo. So, you know, I don't know how many chances they've had to talk to Shane Wright, but they're obviously going to be able to do so tomorrow, Stu.
Yeah, and I mean, Kent Hughes has said, after they won the draft lottery, he said, take their time. They have a lot of time before they have to decide who they're going to take. They're going to speak with their scouts. They're going to scout the players, et cetera, et cetera. I think Shane Wright is still the guy. I'm speculating here, thinking for Kent Hughes. I think it's maybe like, okay, here's the guy we want, and prove me that that's not the right pick. I would think that might be the way he's approaching this with the scouting staff, is that, Shane Wright seems to be the top prospect. Tell me why I shouldn't draft this guy. So I think that's the way they're going. I still think they're probably going to end up taking Shane Wright. But it'll be interesting to see if they even mention before the draft who they're going to take or who they're thinking to take. I don't think they will. I think we're going to get a surprise, or we're going to find out on the draft stage at the Bell Center in July.
All right, you ready for a bomb? The assistant general manager of Slovakia, Otto Haskak, who obviously knows Uri Slafkovsky very well. I mean, he plays for him. Says that the Montreal Canadiens brass was at the World Hockey Championships, and we know that.
Yeah.
And he had a chance to talk to several of them. And he says that Uri Slafkovsky will be the number one pick. Here's the quote. There were a lot of scouts at the World Championships. I met all of the Montreal scouts who will be going first overall. I am close to them. We talked about Slafkovsky, and he's close to being the number 1 pick. Wow. I don't know what to think about that.
Well, I think take it with a bit of a grain of salt, because if they're talking to him, they're obviously not going to say we're not going to take him, right? If they're talking about the kid, we're thinking seriously about taking him. And again, I think anything until draft day when they get up on the stage is basically speculation as to what they're going to do. Kent Hughes is a smart guy. He's going to keep his cards close to his vest. And we'll find out when he gets up on the stage at the draft who they're going to take. And if it's not right, Slafkovsky seems to be the obvious other pick for number 1. The big winger, you stop thinking, who's going to play with Caulfield and Suzuki moving forward. That'd be a guy that'd be a good fit in there. But are they going to draft by position again after they drafted by position with Kotkaniemi? Or are they just going to take the best player available? And maybe Slafkovsky is the best player available. Maybe they, as you said, Gorton and Hughes are both at the World Championships, and maybe he blew them away. I know he played really well there. Maybe he blew them away, and they said, okay, maybe this is our guy now.
Shane Wright, more was expected of him in the playoffs, even though he was able to put up more than a point per game. But he had some lackluster performances. In one game, Grant McCagg of Recruit said that he was the absolute worst player on the ice. Those who follow that team very, very carefully will tell you that was a young team. It was not a very good team, and he was basically alone on an island on that team. So that's their defense for him not having the playoff that was expected. But I think by the time we get closer and closer to draft day in Montreal, there's going to be more and more speculation that he won't be their pick. Ultimately, I think he will be. But by the time we get to that date, unless Kent Hughes comes out and says, hey, listen, if we're going to pick number 1, we're picking Shane Wright. And I say if because I think he won't. He'll listen to any offers for that number 1 pick if anyone wants it. Mind you, this is not the year, and Shane Wright is not the player for a lot of teams to pay a big ante for.
Yeah, and if the draft wasn't in Montreal, the odds of the Canadians maybe announcing or making it pretty clear a day before the draft or whatever who they're going to take, I think would be higher than with the draft being at the Bell Center. It's going to be a show at the Bell Center, right? It's going to be a big deal, and I think they want to make a spectacle out of it, and that's why I don't think we're going to find out who it's going to be until Kent Hughes steps up on the stage and says the Montreal Canadiens are proud to select whoever.
All right. I brought this up a couple of weeks ago, but Slafkovsky really has a lot of people talking about him. And he had he had a couple of bad performances too at the World Hockey Championships, but following up on the Olympics where he was, the best player there as a 17-year-old. And now he plays in the World Hockey Championships versus men, with men and versus men. He really impressed a lot of people. And if Shane Wright is the consensus number 1 centerman in the draft, and Slafkovsky is the consensus number 1 winger in the draft, I really believe they got to do something to try and get both of them. I don't know what the price would be that the New Jersey Devils would be asking for, but can you get a bigger splash than that?
That would be
draft in Montreal.
Not at all. It'd be spectacular. I think we mentioned this last time I was on with you, Tony. It'd be like Brian Burke when he got the Sedin brothers back to back. It would be an amazing splash, and it would, moving forward, the Canadians showed this season that if they play a competitive brand of hockey and a fun hockey to watch, fans will support them, even if they're losing. And to get 2 guys like that, 2 young guys like that, and start this reset or rebuild or whatever they want to call it, it'd be certainly a lot of fun to watch these young guys playing. So, talk about making a splash as a GM new to the job, less than a year on the job, to pull that off on draft day. That would be pretty awesome.
Yeah. All right. We're gonna get to the questions. You can send them in. If you love the podcast, let us know by commenting SICK, SICK, and at that point we'll know that you love the podcast. If you really love it, SICK, enter, SICK, enter, SICK, enter, SICK, enter. By the way, don't type enter. Actually, type push the enter button there. So today's, I think, is going to be a shorter discussion than usual, for a couple of reasons. But I think the biggest is that, I need to wash my face with some cold water right now.
Tony, I know you can't talk about it, but I know you, and I know how emotional this whole procedure is for you, and I wish you nothing but the best moving forward. And you're a good guy, and it's I know this hasn't been easy for you.
Thanks, Stu. Let's get to the questions if we can. You can send them in. Terry Shea and Tony, the Habs are loaded up for the next 2 drafts, and beaucoup de prospects in the pipeline. Should the Habs go big and parlay picks and or prospects for Dak, Chychrun, Lafreniere, or Pierre-Luc Dubois? Stu?
I like your plan to try and get make a deal at the draft with 2 of the top picks. To me, that would make more sense and might be something that they would pull off. I don't know what they'd have to give up to get that pick away from New Jersey, but that would be my plan A if I was Kent Hughes.
Next. They're coming in already, I've been told. Alexis Dubuc, do you think Hughes is better than Bergevin? Well, let's give it time, but Kent Hughes has the potential to be a very good general manager in the National Hockey League.
Let me put it this way: you couldn't have 2 more different personalities than these guys. Yeah. And the downfall with Marc Bergevin, to me, he made things personal all the time. It seemed like, whether it was with PK, with Pacioretty, with Markov, with Radulov, it got personal. He couldn't separate the personal side from the business side. Kent Hughes is a smart guy. He's been an agent, and he has better people skills than Marc Bergevin. And I think that's a huge thing in a GM or coach now. 90% of it is managing people and being able to deal with people and different personalities and not letting things get personal. And that was the downfall with Marc Bergevin. Danault, another example, Yeah. Danault turned down his first contract offer, got personal. The news got leaked, and Danault left Montreal. I think for Hughes, you're right. I mean, to say, is he better than Bergevin? He's just starting. But I think he has a key component in him that is going to allow him to do a better job.
Yeah, look, Stu, I think that when we view the job of a general manager, right, there's different things that make up a great general manager, right? And so an eye for talent obviously is one. The ability to hire great people obviously is 2, and surround yourself with, a fantastic team. The ability, I think, to also put confidence in your people so that they are able to make some key decisions themselves. Managing people like you just talked about, right? And Marc Bergevin's greatest attribute, I think, was his eye for talent. I think the trades that he made, is, from a pro player perspective, I think for the most part were very, very good trades. Did he lose out on the Sergachev deal? Of course he did. And, you could probably question some others, but for the most part, I think he had a real good eye for talent. I think what happened was, there was probably some difficulty there in putting together a team. He was able to do it when they got to the Stanley Cup final, but unfortunately that fell apart and it wasn't sustainable. It was a run for one push. And in terms of managing people, Marc Bergevin is more old-fashioned, and I think Kent Hughes is more modern thinking. And I think Kent Hughes has already done, a real good job of communicating and managing people. And, general managers, some, are great at managing people, and others mismanage some situations. And I think that's what happened.
Yeah. Things always seem to get ugly with Bergevin, right? With Radulov and Pacioretty, the team captain. I mean, it's obvious he didn't want Pacioretty back. And they should have just said, we want to thank Max Pacioretty for everything he did. We're moving in a different direction, in a younger direction, and we're going to try and move Max Pacioretty. But then it became he said, he has to be traded. He didn't have, it got ugly. It didn't have to. The Canadiens didn't want Max Pacioretty back. They were going to move him. And they just should have just said, we're just moving on. Thank you, Max, for everything you've done as a captain, a leader of this team. We appreciate it, but we're moving in a different direction, and we're going to move you or deal you somewhere else.
All right, let's go back to the questions. They're coming in. By the way, sharing is caring. Share with your friends. It's the Sick Podcast. It's Brunchin with Marinaro. Foundling 5S says, if Habs traded for Tyler Bertuzzi, is it possible he won't be able to play in Canada next season due to vaccination? Stu, he's rumored to be on the block. I think it's Elliot Friedman who told us, the great Elliot Friedman. And here's a guy who's 27 years old. Here's a guy who scores 30 plus goals. Here's a guy who's got good size. Here's a guy who would be a perfect fit, in my opinion, for Suzuki and Caulfield.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the COVID, I mean, they change all the time. I'm not sure exactly what the COVID regulations are now as far as him being able to play. The fact they're trading him makes me believe that him being the only player in the NHL not to get vaccinated last year and not being able to play with his team in some key games in Canada did not go over well with his teammates or management in the locker room. And I would think that might be one of the reasons he's on the market right now. But there's no doubt he's a good player. And as I said, who knows? Like I've given up on trying to follow the COVID rules unless, for me, they affect me personally. If I'm traveling and you find out if I test before I go to the airport or not. So I'm not sure what the situation would be with him, or if the rules are even set for next season. What the NHL's COVID rules will be as far as vaccination, etc.
All right. What do you think of the player? I love him. I really love the player. Let's forget all that stuff.
He's a good player. I mean, he can score. He's got grit. He's as I said, for whatever his reasons, he didn't want to get vaccinated. And as I said, I think I'm not around that team, but I would think that probably didn't go over well, and that's probably a reason why he's on the market. And you might be able to get him for lower than value because of that.
Back to the questions. We're live on Facebook. We're live on Twitter. And you can follow us live on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for the Sick Podcast. If they draft Shane Wright, is he going to push down Suzuki as the number one center? The chemistry between Suzuki and Caulfield is pretty impressive so far, Stu.
No, not right away. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they draft Shane Wright and they send him back to junior to play another year next year since he missed all of last season. I don't know if they're going to want to do the Kotkaniemi thing and bring the guy right into the NHL right away. In the future, could he push Suzuki down? We'll see, but no, not right away. No chance.
And listen, 2 years he's played at the of junior hockey. Most of these kids end up playing 4 years of junior hockey. Suzuki played 4 years of junior hockey. He should have played 3 years of junior hockey, but of course he missed one full season due to COVID. That stunts your development. There's no doubt about it. And I would love to see him go back to Kingston, dominate for one season, dominate in the playoffs the way Nick Suzuki did for his team in the OHL when they won the championship and he was the MVP. This is going to be a losing team next year again. They're going to lose more than they're going to win. So there's going to be that environment there. And, as one scout once told me, I never saw a player burned from playing one more year of junior hockey. I did see many burned from being called up to the National Hockey League right away.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly helped Suzuki when they sent them back. And I mean, I've had scouts, I've had a lot of people around the NHL tell me the same thing. Getting to the NHL is a lot easier than staying in the NHL. And getting to the NHL isn't easy. But getting there and staying there and having a career that lasts 5, 6, 7, 10 years is a whole different thing. So one more year, as I said, with Wright, to me, I wouldn't be surprised. And if they do draft him, I would almost expect that they'll send them back to Hamilton. And just as you said, go down there and dominate, go to the World Juniors and dominate there. The World Junior Tournament is known as like a 19-year-old tournament. So 19-year-olds will usually dominate there. He'd be 19 next year going to the World Juniors. So if they do draft him, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes back to junior. And moving forward, we'll see what happens. But Suzuki's a perfect example. Look at the experience he had when he went back to junior. He got traded during that season. He went on a long playoff run, the World Juniors, everything, and it helped him in his development immensely.
More questions. Kyle Whiteman. Hi, guys. Do you anticipate the Habs naming Suzuki as the next captain at the draft, or is it more realistic to expect more trade activity from Habs on draft day? Example, Petrie and Weber. Stu, I'll tackle the first part of it. I don't know if they're going to name Suzuki the captain. And if they do, I don't know if it would be at the draft. My guess is that when they do name the captain, they'll either introduce him at the golf tournament or they'll name him, when they right before the season starts. I mean, I was gonna say opening night, but we'll know by then. But if I were to guess, I would say most likely at the golf tournament.
Either the golf tournament or during training camp, at some point during training camp.
Yeah.
The golf tournament would probably be a better idea. And I think the Canadians want to name Suzuki captain. I think they just want to, they're a little concerned that at his age, and he's going into the first year of that huge contract. So if they put the captain on his shirt, and if he struggles starting off with the new contract, that's the only thing I think. The only thing they're thinking about when they're weighing the options. But I think Suzuki is the guy they want to be their captain because he's going to be here for a long time, and moving forward, he's going to, he's going to be here a long time. He's got that long contract, so
yeah,
I think that's the guy they want to build the team around moving forward.
What if they draft Shane Wright, and Shane Wright in a couple of years from now starts in Montreal, has a great season, like, shouldn't you put a Joel Edmondson as captain for the next couple of years and then just see how it plays out?
They might do that. I mean, they still might do that. They might be thinking what I said earlier. They're just not, with the new contract and everything else, the Edmondson might be a guy because he's only got a couple of years left. Gallagher's here for another 6 years. Gallagher's another guy, candidate to be captain of the team. But I don't know if they're going to give a guy a captaincy and then take it away from him, make Suzuki the captain. So that's why I think they might. I think if I was betting, I'd say they're probably going to name Suzuki the captain. But I could see why you would say like Edmondson for 2 years. I think they're just, other teams around the league have named captains young. And I was talking with Chris Weidman near the end of the season, and I was like, do you have any doubt that Nick Suzuki is ready to be captain? And no hesitation, he said, no, 100%. They respect it in the room, respect it around the league, good with fans off the ice, good with dealing with the media, which is should be a big part of being captain of the Canadiens. So he thinks he's ready. He's a guy who's been around him in the locker room. So I wouldn't be surprised if Suzuki is named captain. And as you said, it would probably be at the golf tournament or, as I mentioned, early in training camp.
More questions coming in. Yanni says, what is Joshua Roy's potential? Speaking with a lot of scouts, I mean, he definitely has a talent and he's definitely an offensive player. They just don't know if it's going to translate to the National Hockey League. There are plenty of players who tore apart the Q and they just couldn't end up cutting it in the National Hockey League. There are plenty of players who tore apart the Q and they could. Fifth round draft picks, late bloomer is one thing. It's a little rare. There's less chances on your side of him being able to do it at the National Hockey League level. But clearly they got to be looking at that right now, Stu, and saying for a fifth round draft pick, we're really happy with that to have the best goal scorer in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League.
Yeah, and you got to remember, he was the number 1 overall pick in the Quebec Junior draft. And I think he's one of those kids that sort of got by just on talent and realized after being the number 1 pick at the QMJHL draft at that age, you're probably, I'm going to be a star or whatever. And maybe, I don't think his work ethic was what it should have been after that. And I think he got the message, though, that you got to be, no matter where you get drafted in the Quebec Junior draft, you got to work, you got to be in shape, you got to do everything else. And I don't know, late bloomer, maybe, I don't know if he's a late bloomer. He just got it later. I think he realized a little bit later, okay, what it's going to do. You're not going to get just by talent to make it to the NHL. That's one of the reasons he dropped down in the draft, I believe. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely potential there. Look what he did this season. Whether he can do that in the NHL level, we'll find out.
More questions on Brunchin with Marinaro. Patrick Tremblay, how has Martin Lapointe's role changed since the change of guard? Had it changed any plans on the scouting department? We know that Bobrov has been brought in and was hired by Jeff Gordon. He was a scout with the New York Rangers. We do know that Martin Lapointe assumed more responsibility, of course, with Trevor Timmins being relieved of his duties. But Daniel Doré's name is floating around. He goes back to Jeff Gordon, going back to the Boston days, I believe, and with the Rangers. He brought him there to New York after that. His name is still out there. But Stu, I've said this before. I know there's no connection to Jeff Gordon or Kent Hughes, or at least I don't think there is. But Martin Madden Jr., the assistant general manager of the Anaheim Ducks, I think he has an unbelievable eye for talent. I don't know if they can bring him in, but
yeah, he does. I don't know if they could bring him in. I don't know what position they would give him here that would entice him to leave the position or the job he has in Anaheim. With Marty Lapointe, he's a connection to Trevor Timmins and all the previous scouting.
Stu, you give him whatever position he wants. When you have good people, you pay them, and so pay him.
There's no salary cap for management.
No, there's not.
So I mean, the Canadians are in the past, they haven't taken advantage of that, really, to be honest. When you think no analytics department until now, The only two guys working with their prospects, Francis Bouillon and Ramage. The question, would he want to? I can see why the Kings would definitely want to go get him. Will he want to come? We'll see.
Yeah. Let's go. I've said this before, right? Al Murray of the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Detroit Red Wings have a scout who, was instrumental in all the players that they were able to draft, like the Zetterbergs and the Datsyuks of this world and the Holmstroms and all that stuff and the Franzens. The Boston Bruins have done a great job of drafting over the years as well. They look where they drafted Lucic, and look where they drafted Marchand, look where they drafted Pasternak, and look where they drafted Patrice Bergeron, and the list goes on and on. You have no salary cap on management team. And look, those good people are under contract, and so it's hard to get them. But if there's a chance, you give them a blank check and you tell them to, fill in whatever they want. I've always believed that. Rick Salvai, who do you think the Habs could be going for in free agency?
Well, if Jeff Petrie is traded, they're going to be looking for a veteran defenseman. Hughes has already said that. Unless they can get a veteran defenseman back in the trade, I don't know what they're going to get for Petrie. So to me, that would be, people mentioned Chris Letang's name has been out there, the connection to Kent Hughes. But if depending on what happens, moving forward with Petrie, et cetera, it's hard to answer that question right now. But if Petrie goes and they get prospects for him, they're going to be looking for a defenseman in free agency.
All right, Johnny Gaudreau, let's tackle his situation now. Speaking of free agency, okay? Here's a guy who's 28 years old. He'll turn 29 in August. He's been with the Calgary Flames for, 8 years or whatever it is. He's coming off a 40-goal, 75 assist, 115-point season, 14 points in 12 playoff games, all right? This guy's always been a good player. He's never been better than he is right now, all right? He is at the prime of his career, And he's an unrestricted free agent. This is what he had to say. I have it here. I'm going to bring it up. It's important, I hope you know, whether I'm here for the next 8 years or not, if my time does end here, people remember me as a good person off the ice, a good teammate, and just a good person. For me personally, I just want people to know how grateful I am for welcoming me here. And then hopefully it's a few more years they can get stuck with me. Not for me. I didn't really like sitting in the locker room and keeping my jersey on and staring up in the stands. That's something I didn't even think of. Like you said, I do have a big decision. We'll see what happens in the next few weeks. But like I said, I love it here. I love the fans. I love the city. But I never really had that moment where I was like, oh, this is it for me. Stu, Pierre LeBrun, at one point on Twitter, probably about 3 or 4 months ago, talked about Johnny Gaudreau's agent having a connection, or Johnny Gaudreau's agent was Marty St. Louis' agent back in the day. Do you think Marty St. Louis, do you think Johnny Gaudreau and the Montreal Canadiens are a fit? Yes or no, and why?
Well, without a doubt. That style of hockey that Marty St. Louis wants to play would be right up Johnny Gaudreau's alley compared to what, the style they play with Sutter in Calgary. That would be, yes, would be a fit. Would they be able to afford him? Of course, the Carey Price salary cap situation, the Shea Weber contract, all that stuff needs to be settled before Hughes knows what kind of money he's playing with. But yeah, without a doubt, Johnny Gaudreau would fit in perfectly with the style of hockey and the type of game that Marty St. Louis wants to play. And my God, what an exciting player like that in Montreal. Fans would fall in love with him.
But he makes you a competitive team, or a much more competitive team right away. And then chances are you're not going to draft in the next 3 or 4 picks in 2023. Stu,
Johnny Gaudreau is going to be better than whatever, probably going to be better than what you're going to get a number 3 or 4 pick. And Connor Bedard, everybody talking, the Canadiens won the lottery this year, but there's no guarantee that you tank, you're going to win the lottery.
They can still, they can get the 2nd pick. I'd be happy with that. They can get the 3rd pick. I'll be happy with that. But think about it. If you sign Johnny Gaudreau, how much money you got to give him?
it's going to be a lot of money. That's what I said. I don't even know if they could be able to afford him with the way, if they don't trade Petrie and if you got Price coming back at 10.5, and if there's still no guarantee that Shea Weber is contract's just going to disappear. So is that Ken Hughes has a lot, like I don't think he really knows exactly what he can do and he mentioned that the postmortem news conference, he just needs some clarity on Carey Price. Like, is he going to need another surgery? Is he definitely out next season? Is his career possibly over? Those contracts with him and Weber are the elephants in the room with this team moving forward. And Johnny Gaudreau is going to cost $10 million, somewhere around there.
They might not even make the playoffs, even if they add them. It doesn't make sense to me. It's not worth it. I mean, I'm sure the fans would love it. Really, they would, but I don't know. I just don't think it's the right. I think the timing's not right.
And Johnny Gaudreau's probably at a point in his career where he wants to win too, right?
Yeah.
He's looking at the Canadiens, not thinking they have a good chance of winning the Stanley Cup. He might be looking elsewhere.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I don't think the timing's right. All right. Where are we going? MJ. Tony, do you get concerned that there's a job opening for the Islanders and maybe St. Louis is weighing his options? He lives in Connecticut. I always thought that Marty St. Louis would be back as coach of the Montreal Canadiens if he wanted to be back for sure. I mean, that hasn't changed. Kent Hughes wants him back. Jeff Gordon wants him back. If he wasn't going to come back, it was going to be based on a family decision. I think the fact, and I think, Stu, that it would have been a foregone conclusion that Marty St. Louis probably would have signed the 3-year deal at $2 million a year. I think the fact that there is an opening and there are openings closer to home for him gives him more leverage, and he could probably end up squeezing out a couple of years. Having said that, the relationship is so great between him, Jeff Gordon, and Kent Hughes. I don't think it would have been a tough negotiation to begin with.
No, and they give him a chance here with no experience as an NHL head coach. I don't know what other team was going to do that. The relationship he had with Gordon and Hughes played into that. I imagine Marty St. Louis feels a little indebted because of that. But the only reason, I think I tweeted this or I might have written it, it's just the only reason I could see Marty not coming back to the Canadiens is, as you mentioned, family reasons. He's already said his family's not going to be moving to Montreal. They'd be staying in Connecticut, and New York's a lot closer to Connecticut. Get pop home on a day off, or have your family come visit you, or whatnot. Having said that, NHL coaches don't see their families a lot, no matter even if they're living in the same city, with the schedule works. I still think Marty St. Louis is going to end up signing with the Canadiens, but that's the only reason I could see him not. And as you mentioned, he might have more leverage now. And if the Islanders really wanted Marty St. Louis and they threw money and term at him and closer to home, you'd have to think he would definitely think about it. I mean, family first, right? That's most people handle their life. And if it's more money, more term, closer to his family, I think Marty St. Louis would be crazy not to think about it.
Yeah, you're right about that, Stu. At the end of the day, we all have to do what's best for us and our family, for sure. Let's go back to the comments and the questions. Nathan, to have Johnny Hockey in a Habs lineup, shouldn't the Habs have at least 2 power forwards to help make space for him and Suzuki and Caulfield?
Well, the Canadiens have some big forwards already. They got Josh Anderson. They got Joel Armia, who's not big, but not necessarily tough.
If only every game with the Canadiens was the World Hockey Championships for Joel Armia, huh?
Different brand of hockey there. It's but no, they have big guys. And that whole thing about the big tough guy is not like it used to be. Size isn't as big as and important in the NHL as it used to be. Smaller guys can play the game, but the Habs have some big guys on the team. It's not like they don't have. They got some big defensemen. They got some big forwards. It's not like Joel Edmondson's a big guy. They got size. The Canadiens have size already.
All right, more questions on the Sick Podcast. It is Brunchin with Marinaro. Lionel Starnes, or Lionel, pardon me, says, we know the team won't finish high, but do you think they'll be close to a wild card?
Can't really answer that question until after the draft and after free agency and everything else. That's
it would be counterproductive, Stu. If they're a wild card, if they're close to a wild, if you're going to miss the playoffs, be the worst you can be.
Mm-hmm. But yes and no, Tony, because you also want young guys to be in a competitive environment. If not necessarily, if they're not, it's not a winning environment. Maybe they miss the playoffs, but you want to be competing every game. You don't want to be a team that's just, finishes 10 points behind everybody else in the league and you're the worst team in the league. It's not a way to develop. You look at Buffalo, you look at other teams like that, Edmonton, teams that have had high draft picks and have been horrible, and Ottawa to an extent too. When players get used to losing, they sort of accept losing. So it's important to be able to put a team on the ice that has a chance to win and is going to compete. And that's what I think Jeff Gorton knows that. I think he, as he said, we're not going to tank. They're also not going to, he's not going to make deals just to try and get into the playoffs. It's just, he said right from day one, his goal is to build a team that's going to be competitive year after year after year.
But Stu, if you're not competitive or not very competitive, I mean, look, last year they finished 32nd, right? But when Marty St. took over, for the most part, they were competitive. They still lost. So they could still be competitive. Mm-hmm. But if they lose more often than not, and they finish at the bottom of the standings, then they get the first pick, or they get the second pick, or they get the third pick, or they get the fourth pick. Stu, you can't finish at the bottom one year and then try and be much better the next year and finish 11th or 10th. You're not going to have success that way. Every team, or almost every team, that won the cup or won cups in the past 10 or 15 years, the Pittsburgh Penguins drafted Fleury at 1, Malkin at 2, Jordan Stahl at 2, Sidney Crosby at 1. Chicago drafted Kane at 1, Taves at 3. Washington drafted Ovechkin at 1, Backstrom at 4. Tampa Bay drafted Stamkos at 1, Hedman at 2. Edmonton drafted McDavid at 1, Draisaitl at 3. And I know Toronto hasn't taken the next step yet, but they drafted Matthews at 1, Marner at 4, Riley at 5. Because if you finish at the bottom one year and then you try and patch and get better, the way the Canadians did when they drafted Galchenyuk at 3 and tried to patch, and then the way they did when they drafted Kotkaniemi at 3 and tried to get better, if that year is not a great draft year and you're not drafting an impact player, it's not worth it. You'll never get over the hump. So as much as you said they need to be competitive, if they're bad for the next year, they have the potential to be great for the next 10.
What should give Canadians fans confidence right now, Tony? Is it 3 years ago? I think the Rangers sent that letter to their fans saying that they were rebuilding and it was going to take. So this 3 or 4.
It was done. It was done in February. I don't remember which year, but I would say it'll probably in February. It'll probably be 4 years. Or something. So and if it wasn't 4, it'll be. So if it's not 3.5, it's 4.5.
And who was that was Jeff Gorton, right?
Correct. Yes.
Started that. So I'm sure that he's seen that the plan he used there worked. The Rangers are 1 win away from possibly going to the conference final. And that's a strategy I think he's going to take moving forward. I think they're going to try and get a little bit better. They don't want to finish last next year again. But I think he's got a 3 or 4 year plan to make this team a team that can get into the playoffs and be competitive year after year. And I hear people, older Canadians fans saying, "Oh, the goal used to be to win the Stanley Cup. Now it's just to get into the playoffs." What a joke. Well, just getting into the playoffs in the NHL now is an accomplishment in this league. You need 100 points to get into the playoffs. And this is one of Marc Bergevin's lines, anything can happen in the playoffs. And it's true. We saw that last year with the Canadians. We see that every year where there's upsets. Unless now we have this Tampa Bay team, which is remarkable in a salary cap world, what they've been doing. But I think, there's 3. I think he's got like a 3-year plan. And I don't think he's going to rush it, Tony. I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I don't think he's going to rush it to try and make this team. He's not going to sacrifice the future for making this team possible to get to the playoffs next year.
Yeah.
If that makes sense to you. I think he's got a gradual process. And if things go crazy next year and young guys come in and they produce more than they should, and one of the reasons you mentioned Marty St. when they took over this year, they had that winning streak and they struggled a bit at first and they went on that winning streak. And then at the trade deadline, they traded away Lehkonen, they traded away Sherratt, they traded away Toffoli, they got rid of some key guys, and then after that, things really went downhill. But if you have a young team next year that's competing and doing well, are you going to make trades like that again to have them drop right down to the bottom? That's a question that's tough to answer because you still want to make young guys on the team believe that you're still trying to win, right?
Yeah. All right. Back to the before we go to the questions, actually, I want to talk to you about a Canadiens prospect. Sean Farrell, of course, who was drafted in the 4th round, 124th overall in 2020. Here's a kid who played with the U.S. national under-17s and then the under-18s, has played a couple of seasons with the Chicago Steel, then moved over to Harvard University. 28 points, 28 points in 24 games. We saw him at the World Hockey Championships. This is a kid that has a lot of talent. A lot of people are starting to wonder whether or not he's going to sign with the Montreal Canadiens. And he has a message for Canadiens fans. You want to know what that is? Did you see it?
No, I didn't. What is it?
He says, don't worry, Canadiens fans. I'll sign with the Canadiens.
Mm-hmm.
All right? So if you're worried about losing out on that, there you have it. Okay.
It's rare that guys don't sign with the teams they're drafted. Doesn't happen a lot either.
Yeah, no, it doesn't happen all that often.
Yeah.
All right, okay, where are we going? Tony and Stu, both of you answer who is winning the Stanley Cup this year. I think the best team is the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yep. To me, Tampa Bay, they know how to win in the playoffs. They just know what to do. I mean, look at the series against Toronto. You have your best players, Stamkos blocking shots. They have the best goalie in the league. They got the best GM in the league. They got a great coach. They're just I mentioned earlier, it's amazing the team that Julien Brisebois has been able to build in a salary cap world. And every year they lose players and then they find guys to come in and replace them.
Hey,
it's
listen,
remarkable. To me, they're still the team to beat. Colorado's got Colorado Tampa would be an awesome Stanley Cup final.
Oh, it'd be amazing.
But Colorado, I don't think is at the level where Tampa is now when it comes to just knowing and understanding what it takes to win in the playoffs. And I think it was the Oilers.
Sacrifice.
I remember the Oilers, when they lost to the Islanders years ago in one of the Stanley Cup finals, and Ken Gretzky, one of the guys, and they were walking by the Islanders' room, and they're all black eyes and beat up and stitches, and they're like, "Oh, that's how you win in the Stanley Cup playoffs." Excuse me.
All right. Okay. Back to the listen. I find it hard to think of and imagine a team beating Tampa Bay 4 times in 7 games. They haven't lost 2 games in a row in the playoffs in 60 games or something, which is remarkable. They haven't lost 2 games in a row. It's hard to eliminate a team when they never lose 2 games in a row. You know, they're the first team to win 10 consecutive playoff series since the Islanders in the 80s.
Yeah. And Vasilevsky the last 7 elimination games, correct me, I think he has 6 shutouts.
6 shutouts.
In the last 7 elimination games. Think about that. That's remarkable.
And his save percentage is I don't know, 950 something. It's not normal. It really is crazy.
No, it really is what Julien Brisebois has been able to build there. Steve Yzerman started it, obviously, but what he's been able to continue on and build there is just remarkable. And when you think, the Canadiens, it was Julien Brisebois used to work for the Canadiens. Yeah.
All right, Stu, you and I will do this again. Thanks for your time on this Sunday morning on Brunchin with Marinaro, and we'll talk to you soon all right, have a good one, Stu.
Okay, take care of yourself there,
cheers.
Tony.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you very much. And for all of you, you can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, and Instagram at The Sick Podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Sick Podcast. It's absolutely for free. So thank you very much, everyone. And on that note, have a good Sunday, everyone. Thank you very much.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow The Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by 8.6, Intense by Nature.